it's disappeared on my
That's
head.
right. Okay, I think we're live finally. So fantastic. Welcome back, everyone, to the FPL Script. This is episode 17, our Gameweek 20 preview. Falling a bit short in terms of episodes, so we do apologize. But of course, with the sort of big swing and missing out fixtures over the holiday period, that made it pretty difficult. But I hope you guys all had a wonderful holiday period and Happy New Year as well. From us here at FPL Script, I'm Fran. I mean, I had 70 points this game week here. Just looking back at game week 19, pretty dull week because I went for the Palmer captaincy. I realize that anytime I say if I've had bad events happen to me, that it's definitely not definitely not relative to what JD has in store or has had in store. But yeah, like it always feels bad in a week where I guess you own a certain player and you go for the alternative option that the week ultimately rested on that one decision, which I'm sure, of course, you know fully like how that feels in terms of one player, I guess, ruining the game for the rest. But I left a lot of points to the bench. Cunha had to go off at halftime. So a second consecutive week where I had someone come off when he was probably due to play the full match, and it would have been nice, right? Like Flecken last week and now Cunha this week. So really annoying for me, and it's kind of forced to transfer my way as well.
So hi everyone, Happy New Year from my side as well. It's been not a Happy New Year in FPL, but yeah, this is just a consequence of the path I decided to trod on, I suppose, where I have to maximize rank gain, and that's the only way. Okay, it's not the only way. It's the quickest way, and it's the quickest way both sides. And unfortunately, there's just been one side to it. It's also getting more difficult to begrudge Salah's points because he's getting like 2 xGI now in a game with no penalties.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even like it's undeserved. I suppose a couple of his previous returns, like against Southampton, were absolutely out of the blue, where he was doing nothing and then he got a penalty against City as well. And those were the games where I was thinking, this is just such a bad beat. But he had 7 shots against West Ham or something ridiculous. It's just and you know, I've been a Salah fan for a long time, so I'm at a point where I can actually enjoy his football back again. He was just so good against West Ham. Even I don't know if that nutmeg was intentional for the assist.
I think it was watching back.
I think it was. Yes,
but you're right. 7 shots, 4 key passes as well.
Yeah, just ridiculous. Absolutely brilliant stuff from him, and you know, it's better than what Ødegaard is doing, and has done throughout the season. But I was talking to Fran before the pod started that there's few weeks where he's also veered away from Salah captaincy, and those are the weeks where I've been able to share in his pain, because otherwise it's very difficult to sort of empathize with what's going on. Also, what Fran said about relative bad game weeks, I thought about that, and like how long are people going to walk on eggshells just because someone else is having a worse game week? Like, it's at some point you have to also have your own benchmarks, I suppose. And for Fran, he's that generational pauser to have one player go off and his captain blank is actually painful given what's happened in all the other weeks. And I think Flecken was the worst one, right? Last week.
Yeah,
and because we didn't record an episode, we didn't get to talk about it, but both of us played Flecken, and that was perhaps the worst thing that could have happened, which was 0-0. So yeah, nothing much to talk about. I guess Ran was the only positive, but I had Dibbling on my bench who scored. So yeah, Son missing the penalty is just one more thing that this adds to my negative variance. I think it's like minus 185 now on review.
Yeah.
So it's like 99.8%
that
now.
Could actually be quite crazy looking back.
Yeah. So we'll see where we end up on that.
Yeah, we'll have to see. I mean, well, yeah, it's weird because I think in FPL you just know, like, even with my variants, I'm like what 56, 57th percentile. Like, it's nothing crazy, to be honest.
Okay,
but I'm still.
So you're median, almost at the median right now.
Exactly. Like, yeah, like I'm at still a relatively good rank, but you know, like we it just shows you how much luck you'd like to have, I guess, in expense of, like the EV that you can potentially grab versus the field at the end of the day. Still, like,
Yes.
that is so much more sizable. And you can only laugh sometimes. But yeah, let's just
I know Jack. Sorry, Jack pointed out this that Holland people that wildcarded on in 3 and sold Holland, and then Holland also kept getting EV boosts right as the game weeks went on.
true.
And a similar thing is happening with Salah now, and it
Yeah,
is completely
yeah,
acceptable because even and especially with Salah, we actually have more information than we did with Holland.
exactly.
So it's more than fair that his EV is now getting a boost, and like we discussed in the previous episode, the name of the game is now predicting who is going to get EV boosts rather than who has good EV, because we can already see who has good EV and we can solve for it. But trying to speculate who is going to get good EV in the future is perhaps where all the skill lies.
True. Yeah. Some absolutely top names in the chat as well. Just want to mention.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some interesting discussions there, but happy for some people, or sorry it happened. I think this week we wanted to discuss once again fixture scheduling and then just sort of our general plans. A good comment that I think Elevenify made in a Discord channel that's very, very secretive is he made the general point that this season you're probably not going to see the fruits of saving your chips for this idea of optionality, and it might just be better to commit to certain plans or strategy knowing that you're going to grab the EV up front and realize that in expense of this idea of optionality, like it was last season where you could see those like massive swings coming out of those FA Cup outcomes. And I think he made a pretty good point there, because we just know, I think last year nothing was really unsurprising in terms of I guess the scope of possibility in terms of the upsets that we've had. But now we also know that scope anyways has reduced this season, and the only, I guess, change so far has been that sort of Merseyside derby postponement. But we already know that the spice that comes from fixture scheduling postponements and rearrangements is clearly not there. So I did think that point was really worth mentioning when we look at the schedule. And to anyone who's interested, right, the schedule is roughly, what we're saying is around a 50-50% of game week 24-25 being the double game week for the Merseyside derby reschedulement. What's very important about that is I think it has implications on the assistant manager chip, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And then in terms of the rest of the schedule, what we know now is that blank game week 29 will just be the outcome of the Carabao Cup semifinals. We'll talk about that too. And then you have your more traditional sort of fixture slate. Do you want to just sort of round that off for us, JD?
Yeah, of course. So what we were trying to understand, and we presented this in not last week, but in the last episode, is that we probably have to start thinking about chip strategy. And like Fran said, already assign chips in certain game weeks before you solve, because having the optionality of rolling through transfers is going to change your approach to chips quite a bit. Also having assistant manager chip, which is going to come into play. So for example, when I'm running solves right now, I am incorporating triple captaincy in game week 24.
Right.
I also make sure that you assign weightage to either one of the game weeks, because it doesn't matter, to be honest, whether it's 24 or 25, because Salah's going to be the triple captain in either of those game weeks. The main thing that I realized, and I probably should have known this earlier, was that the Carabao Cup double header, which is the 2 legs of the semi-final, are going to occur versus Jan 4th, and the second is Jan 7th, and the second is Feb 4th.
Yeah. So
and the problem, yeah, thanks for that, Fran. So the problem with the second leg is it comes between 24 and 25, if I'm not wrong, which just means that because I'm looking at how Newcastle have fielded, or Eddie Howe has fielded teams, it's clear to me that he is prioritizing this tournament now, because Newcastle probably need something to show for all these years of investment, and it's because he's been playing Isaac in every single Carabao Cup game. So looking at that, I just think Southampton is probably around that time where there's a possibility Isaac could get a rest, but I'm not too worried. Firstly, because his EO is just everyone owns him at this point, so it doesn't matter.
Right.
And the second is it's more towards the Liverpool players, right? Because you want to bring in, or I think maybe most people already has three Liverpool players. Maybe I'm one of the very few who still does not have three Liverpool players. So in any case, you want to bring those players in, and it's all about trying to postpone or delay how close you can get to the actual double game week. So again, people like Tala or Planet FPL are better positioned to let us know when is the latest. Then they can inform people before it can still happen in 24 or 25. But I'm sure that deadline is fast approaching, because once you get beyond a certain point, then you know for sure it's not going in either of those double game weeks.
Exactly.
And knowing last season's double game week uh, fixtures or how scheduled, I just see this as another thing where they bank on certain European fixtures not happening for Premier League teams, where they can then schedule the extra game. So I'm not too sure how the PL goes about this stuff, but I'm hoping they still schedule it in 24 or 25, because review currently has the weightage split between the two, which makes me think uh, review's skeptic by nature, as he should be. And the fact that he has it as 50-50 means that
I think
there's still a sizable probability.
those odds have been corroborated by Ben, and I think
They have.
Planet
Yeah.
FPL James seems to actually still lean 24, whereas
24.
from just reading Talas tweets, I do think he seems to imply it's probably going to lead to 25. So I think we kind of have
Yeah.
almost like an even split, right?
We do.
And
We do. That's true.
and ultimately they're not the ultimate decision makers. So yeah, like I think that's quite crucial. But I think the point of looking at the slate is also just about what windows you want to make decisions on, and
Yes.
why it might be helpful to save free transfers so that you can kind of reach those decision making windows, and still sort of maximize EV. I think is the crucial point. So I think for this game week, you don't get anything. But I think between 20 and 21, that's the first leg of the Carabao Cup fixture. So you do have some sort of, once again, positive reinforcements in terms of knowing what the odds of the final contenders will be, just because if there's, like, let's say any sort of results that we have this weekend, that's going to change the odds going forwards, right, for the future blank. And that, I think that can also already start to push you towards the direction of how you plan to play the free hit. Whether that's on Gaming 29 or, in the blank in Gaming 34, right? So if you look at the blanks here. Now, a lot of people will probably, after last season, be fondly reminiscent of, like, free hitting on a double, because that worked out really well. But I think what makes it tricky this season is the amount of chips you have available. So if you're someone who hasn't used any of the chips realistically, you're still looking at triple captain on some game week. So that's one chip. You're then looking at a free hit on one game week. You're looking at a bench boost on another game week. And then you have to AM, right? So two blanks. Sure, you could maybe, I think we could probably say you could plan for one of those blanks, ultimately. You might free hit one of those blanks. Triple captain probably best on a double. I mean, the assistant manager chip kind of has to be played over singles. Like, when you look at the window, you'll never be able to get a pocket of doubles, or a pair of doubles. So you either play it like 31 to 33, 36 to 38, or you play it 24/25 to 2 game weeks after whenever the double lands, right? Because you can technically start using the assistant manager chip from Gameweek 24, but there's no reason to really use on Gameweek 24 if the double lands on 25. That's my personal opinion. You might disagree, but I think that's generally how I see the chip, to be quite honest. And then we'll find chip pricing probably sometime soon, maybe late Jan, early Feb. I can't imagine that they'll provide chip pricing or assistant manager chip, or rather assistant manager prices on Gameweek 24 when it's released. So I think hopefully the prices will come out maybe February, something like that. And you have, or I mean late Jan, so that you kind of have enough time to plan for your 24-25 moves, depending on when the double falls. And then, you can kind of make those plans. I would say, having had a look at review, fortunately, and seeing the probabilities. If you have the double landing on 24, I would say the best strategy is Sean Dyche, and then layered with another manager on 25 and 26 if the double falls on 24, and then if the double falls on 25, that actually looks like a really good Arnie slot chip usage, because you then actually have the double game being Wolves at home versus Bournemouth away, and that obviously is a lot more upside for using Arnie slot, right? Whereas when you're facing out versus Bournemouth and you're literally above Bournemouth in the table, honestly, it's only really for Liverpool to lose, because they've got two really tough away games. Like, I have to give credit to Everton. They've been a pretty tough nut to crack for the most part, right? Whenever they play at home. And for Bournemouth, I mean, they've absolutely destroyed top teams at home this season for the most part.
Yep.
At their own home. And when you look at their net xGD, they're probably as good as Arsenal, in terms of performance so far. Obviously, like, we expect Arsenal to just be better. But that's the kind of level that Bournemouth had displayed this season. So that's what I would say. And then, you can then probably play Glasner or Pep 26, 27, something like that, right? Or you might want to play slot all the way through, but I think that's kind of like how you'd play it. And then what I would say is the next window where you get a lot of information is probably around Gameweek 28, something like that, so that you can kind of get an understanding of the slate of, the blanks and the doubles and things like that. So interestingly, I suppose, and going back to the Elevenify point, you probably want to make some decisions now in terms of how you want to lay out your chip strategy. And I think for anyone who's used all their chips, I still think that template strategy that Ben Crellin outlined of just using the triple captain on 24 or 25 makes the most sense, because you're probably not going to get...
So can we do this? So
Go for it.
Because you've used triple captaincy in 2, right?
Yeah,
so
I've used it, yeah.
Rather than talk in abstract terms, maybe you want to run us through what you're thinking based on your specific team right now.
Sure. I actually think that I'll probably free at 29 if it's a Newcastle Palace suspension on 29, because I think the key thing is on Gameweek 29 right now. I'm sorry. I'm 100% expecting Liverpool to smash Tottenham over 2 legs. I think 2 legs just makes it even more comfortable for me to say that. Whereas Newcastle, I think they could definitely take on Arsenal. So right now the odds are favored towards Arsenal, but I'd say I expect Newcastle to probably still be able to steal it. And I don't like the idea of selling my Newcastle players and Palace players versus the idea of selling my Arsenal and Chelsea players, because I own, let's say, Palmer, and I own 2 Arsenal players now, Ødegaard and Gabriel. But I would say that when you look at the midfield, there's interchangeable EV with Ødegaard, in the sense that Mbumo, Eze, Bruno all provide value, on the other side. Whereas if I look at, let's say, Gabriel, I still think that I have other defenders that can cover the sort of value of Gabriel, particularly through Liverpool defense anyways. And that would still give me some of the double EV, but then I can still ship them out later and sort of bring in a defender later down the line. So there's not too many consequences of selling an Arsenal defender, because fine, I lose a little bit of in the bank value, but so be it. Whereas with Newcastle and Palace, I find that they're probably the teams that I'm going to be invested into for the foreseeable. So like, I'll probably be holding Isak for a long time, and I'll find it harder to sell him. So that's
I think we lose more ITB value for Newcastle players, right? Because Isaac has risen so much, and Hall as well has risen by 0.3, 0.4, something like that.
So I think what's interesting is, I would say probably between Isak and Palmer.
You're factoring in Palmer as well. Okay.
Yeah, I think Isak is like a perfect hedge to Palmer. So then it kind of becomes for me a question of what the Arsenal players versus the Newcastle, the residual Newcastle plus Palace players, and I'm probably going to be invested into Eze over this run. I'd love to keep Hall and Munoz. So I think it's more unfavorable for me if the free hit drops, because let's say Newcastle have beaten Arsenal. So, but yeah, if suddenly we have Arsenal winning out, the only player that I'll actually probably keep is Palmer, and then I'll have to keep Salah and Trent as well, which is 3 players, which I think is fine, because all it really means is that I'll lose 1 point something EV to the Haaland captainers if people go for Haaland Gaming 29. But let's be completely honest, we know that that's a pretty substantial hit, right? Because if you sell someone for Haaland and you're not free hitting, you're just going to lose a lot of bank value, even when you wildcard. and you're probably not even going to wildcard into Haaland, if we're being honest. So it is kind of a tough one to crack. And I think the only value really to the free at 29 now seems like this idea of, maintaining your value and then sort of maximizing there. But I think I'll probably tank it if it's Arsenal and Chelsea postponed, and I think I'll going through, and I'll probably free hit if it's Newcastle Palace going through, just because I can see myself wanting to maintain the value I have in Hall and Munoz, who I'm sure is going to rise over this period. Like the production that Munoz is dropping right now is, I'd struggle to I'd struggle to believe that he'd be less than 5 million by the time we reach there, and I'm sure Eze will rise as well as long as he's fit. So those kind of things are like kind of in my consideration. Some people are, and I think going back to the discussion we said, though, the free hits aren't that scary this season, right? Like in terms of you've got so many chips to use, you probably want to use a free hit anyways. Some people have already used a free hit on a single game week, and I don't think it's even going to be that devastating outside of that sort of bank value impact. I don't know what you think. And then I'll probably AM. The big question I think is going to be the bench boost, right? Because you have the bench boost outside of one of the AM opportunities, and the classic big bench boost that we all love in FPL is on 36. But to be honest, the AM is probably the strongest chip in the game, and you could argue that still most of the value is going to come from the on the beach impacts on 37, 38 versus, let's say, the fixtures around 33, which would be like 31 and 32, right? So I think it's 33 and 36 could be quite similar for the AM, but it's 31, 32 versus 37, 38 that I find most interesting. And I can't really litigate on this now because we're so far out from understanding what the table impacts would be. Yes. I think one thing that
and the prices as well, right? Because true. So the whole point, I think, FPL towers have yet to release prices could also be because maybe they're trying to see if someone like Amorim, I see someone in the chat saying Amorim should be 0.5, and this is exactly what you don't want to do. If you price Amorim at 0.5, it's going to be ridiculously easy for people to make a decision, because if United are 15th and Amorim is 0.5, it's a no-brainer for you to go with him.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe they're doing the sensible thing for once. And I just have to mention the fact that Bruno Fernandes dropped in price was the most ridiculous thing that has happened probably in a long time.
That's true, actually. You want to discuss that?
And okay, so I apologize for randomly switching topics, but I just felt like it's very important to discuss. This was supposed to be one of the fundamental tenets of price changes in FPL. And again, they can always hide behind the fact that they've never disclosed anything from their end.
True.
So they always hide behind that. It's been evident. Yeah. But it's such a clearly established rule that has been followed for all this time.
But don't you think it's just someone being lazy? Are we giving them too much credit for like manipulating this? Yeah.
No. I'm not saying they're manipulating it. I'm saying that they've been ambiguous from day one.
True.
Because they can then get away with stuff like this when they don't have enough staff to handle this behemoth.
That's true.
It's actually getting to that stage now because FPL regularly has 10 million plus users now, and it's not an easy task anymore.
Yeah, and I guess it also goes back to the points of, let's be honest, we said it last week. We prefer, not last week, I don't even know, maybe 2 weeks ago, but we prefer clarity and rules and understanding how to interpret them. Whereas it seems like the general direction that they're going is more spice, more uncertainty, more sort of incentive for people to play despite having bad starts and stuff like that, which is kind of going. And to be honest, I think they're smart enough and they've been planning the game out enough to know that they're trying to also hurt us, right? The engaged player base who are trying to game the system as much as possible. So yeah, like I think, and even looking at sort of Ragaboli's great exploits recently, it's like initially I think, no price rises were missed, no price falls were missed, and we're still seeing a little bit of that. And I think some randomness is there. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe there's just still more tweaks for him to be done. But as much as he's done incredibly impressive work with the price changes, there's still things that slip through the cracks, and I think that's still intentional. I'm sure from a game design perspective from them.
Yeah, that's actually a great point, because I had a small discussion with Sartal. I don't remember if it was before he banked on what was the scenario? Was it Mbumo not double dropping or something of that nature? That
Oh, was it?
uh,
There was
live
there was
FPL
one specific player, wasn't it? It was
correctly.
Trent. Trent.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Trent. Yeah, yes. So and this, I think the follow up was with Mbumo, where he applied the same rule and it worked out yet again. So I don't remember if we spoke before this happened or after, but anytime a new price algorithm comes out, I treat it with skepticism naturally, because a lot of people have already tried. A lot of organizations with money to spend have tried, and they've been unsuccessful. Not that there's a correlation, obviously. It's completely dependent on you actually getting the algorithm, or coming close to guessing the algorithm. So my hypothesis right now is that the weeks that he got all of that stuff right were coincidentally good game weeks for predictions, where you didn't have this randomness that FPL is accounting for. And as soon as the accuracy dropped, it's in those weeks where, I don't know, too many weeks were in succession, or too many game weeks were in succession in a short space of time, and it sort of messed with whatever live FPL was coming up with. And to his credit, obviously, he's made great strides already. Yeah, he's like, absolutely. There's no doubt about that.
If you look at what the
been...
FPL.com, he I mean,
yeah,
hats off to him.
It's yeah, absolutely. And see, FPL Statistics was doing this for such a long time that
that's true. Yeah,
we had accepted, okay, this is the extent to which we were going to reach in terms of understanding price rises, and he's come is I'm assuming he's been gathering data for a long time before he actually published his price predictor. But yeah, absolutely flowers to him. But like you said, there's still some aspects that need to be exploited. Just to round off the discussion on schedule and our chip strat, and we can probably move on. For me, because I have all my chips left other than wildcard one, obviously, triple captain 24/25 seems pretty obvious.
Yeah.
There's no need to experiment with that.
Are you gonna do it on Salah though?
Yeah, I have to. I was banking on getting some break. You know what was the biggest break I got? Palmer scoring 10 and Salah scoring 9 against Leicester. That's the only week I managed to captain a player who scored more points than Salah, and it was by 1 point. So yeah. So that boat has already sailed. But as far as AM is concerned, and we've already spoken about this, but the two strategies that I was looking at was free hit 29, and then AM 31 to 33 remains constant.
When do you wildcard?
Followed by wildcard 35 and bench boost 36. And then the second one, which is probably what you're looking at, was not dead ending, but wildcarding in 30 by making certain moves to make sure you have 11 players for 29. And then again, AM 31 to 33 and then bench boost 36. So there's a lot of similarity in those chip strats. Like Fran said, I think for someone like Fran who has insane team value, he can probably forego even someone like Salah and bring him back. I don't think it's going to be possible for most people. I'm not one of them, because I have no value banked from Salah. I can actually make that move very easily and not have any problems with it. So I suspect Fran and I will end up on the same strategy because of vastly different reasons. So we'll see. Like Fran said, closer to deadline or closer to the game weeks, we'll probably get more information that will force our hand. But I like the way of thinking where rather than having optionality, you already commit to a certain strategy and then just live with the outcome. And if the fixes don't fall the way you think they will, then just react with having lots of FTs in the bank.
So, yeah, I think what's nice about the AM in theory is that I think that the floor of the AM is actually quite high still. So like if you were going to use AM, and I think Christopher in chat kind of asked that question, like if you were going to use the AM anyways on double gaming 24/25, I think that's totally fine. Maybe the single game weeks don't produce the same amount of value, but I just can't see how it's going to be an inherently bad play. Whereas like in previous seasons, sometimes you would, like if people, let's say, use a bench boost on game week 1, sometimes it just kind of falls flat on its face. Like I don't see it's not a chip that, for example, forces you to wildcard out of a BB1, right? It's not a chip that really impacts too much, other than you just got to cough up some money for a manager, or potentially a triple up, right? So yeah, I think that's a good sort of discussion point. The key thing, though, as I said, there's good windows of sort of decision making where, like, between 20 and 21, you have the first leg of the Carabao Cup. 28, you basically find out the rest of the season slate around there, or you start to get a good understanding of it. And then probably between, let's say, so we mentioned, I think, like 24 and 25, you find out the double game, like the blank game week on 29. And that gets finalized, right? And there's obviously some FA Cup matches, as you guys can see as well, that will help us like piece together the picture a little bit more. But crucially, it's those sort of round of 16 matches that give us that sort of level of information that we need. And committing, I think, to a strategy is quite helpful. I think, and even let's say if you were now to be thinking super, it's not possible to actually plan any FPL transfers now if you're just planning to sidestep free at 29, because let's be honest, you cannot have a good functioning FPL team without Arsenal, Chelsea, Newcastle, and Palace players, and Liverpool players.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And I haven't even mentioned Aston Villa as well, right? So that's Liverpool's rival or opponent in Gaming 29. So I would say maximize your EV now. In the meantime, not caring too much about Gaming 29, and then, you know, when we get more information progressively, you can try to put more importance into whether you free hit there or not, and that sort of thing. Cool. Let's just move on to. I've actually decided to add a segment. It's called Martin Ødegaard.
Yes.
I mean, you've got strong thoughts on Ødegaard, but I think one thing I'd like to mention from the outset of the show is, for anyone who's bought into Ødegaard, I think we knew what we were investing into. And he still, for the most part, looked like exactly the same player that I thought I was buying. I think Hedgehog named him infamously Bernardo Silva with penalties. And he is Bernardo Silva with penalties. But the EV, I think, for the most part, is still there. Unless you're also telling me that Noneri's taken off his corners and maybe he's not even going to take penalties. Which, one outcome, I think, is uncertain in terms of the probabilities of Noneri consistently playing right wing and just getting minutes within the team when Havertz is probably not ill. And we'll get information around that this week, right, with Brighton.
Yes.
And then on the penalty front, I think you've just got to believe that he's the penalty taker until he isn't. And there's still going to be a lot of value tied up into that. But I think for the most part, as I said earlier, when I was discussing this sort of Arsenal-Chelsea fixture impact, is there's more than enough midfielders with good enough, I think, and I will just say it, XPPM, right? Like, just efficiency almost within the midfield position, that you don't need Ødegaard. If you can't stand him, sell him. You can go for Gordon and Mbumo, Eze. Now these are all great functioning picks. Even some of the budget players are great. If you don't want Ødegaard, that's fine. But I think for the most part the EV is real because of what we know, and you know, you always have to just fairly apply these to a player who just has absolutely ridiculously poor underlying stats and just accept it, because yeah. That's my opinion. But you will, I don't know, you can probably add your thoughts on Bruno in this discussion, since he's the same price.
Absolutely. And the thing is, he isn't, but I appreciate you honoring Bruno's price before that illegitimate price drop.
True.
So, okay, so everything, almost all of those things were said in jest, for what it's worth. But of course, I'm very irritated when people compare Ødegaard and Bruno, because, you know, I'm team Bruno, but I know you've loved Ødegaard since his Real Madrid days. So
I'm team Bruno as the football player and in general, like as an FPL asset.
Okay, then we are on the same page. So I guess the only gripe I've had with Ødegaard is because I don't own Salah, I have had the money to go for Isaac, Trent, Ødegaard, and Palmer. Right? Mm-hmm. And unless you have insane team value like yourself, I don't think a lot of people are on that path. And also, I own Son as well. And so, unfortunately, if I didn't have the money, because if I had owned Salah, I would have been forced to go for someone like Eze, and I would have had more points as a result, which is making it twice as painful as it would have been. Because, like you said, XPP, I mean, he's not that efficient. It's just that for you have the TV, and for me, I don't own Salah. So those are the reasons why we went there. Because I was looking at Ødegaard and Gordon, and I adjusted Gordon's minutes up to, let's say, 87 just to see. And he is 0.2 short of Ødegaard for the next 12 game weeks on XPPM or XPP, which is ridiculous. I'm thinking, what? Perhaps the good game weeks have already passed us in terms of Ipswich, right? Because that was the main one where
it. And
we
Tottenham
banked
as well, basically.
most of the exactly.
Still to come.
So I don't know. I mean, I'm going to wait till Tottenham, obviously, but I think I might just sell Ødegaard for Salah in game week 22. So we'll see what happens with that.
Seems fair to me, to be honest. I mean, I think I'm going to do the exact same thing with Ødegaard, where I'll hold him until 21 because I don't really see the point necessarily in shipping him to anyone before that. But then, yeah, after 21, the thing that is a bit tricky with Gordon, I think, is if you're investing into him, is that there are bad Newcastle fixtures, but they come like 5 weeks out, right? So it's like 25 and 27, and Ødegaard actually has a clean run of fixtures up until basically 27. So in theory, you can hold Ødegaard for a long time, but you just have to trust that he's a real pick. In the meantime, though, you probably have someone like Eze, who arguably is a lot better for a lot less, and I'm talking like gigantic disparity between him and, let's say, the likes of Ødegaard. And I think he's probably the pick that I find the most interesting that I don't own. At the same time, though, I'm not sure I'm going to be investing heavily into the striker position and getting the same value there. So sometimes you just have to look at absolute points and just say Ødegaard does provide that to you. But yeah, I think it's very plausible that I move Ødegaard and Mbeumo ultimately in 2-3 game weeks time to the likes of Eze and Bruno, because I think both of those players still have better points outcomes as a combination than, let's say, Mbeumo and Ødegaard, who are the two midfielders that I own. But I also say this whilst owning Rodgers, so I'll need to sort of assess what I do with these sorts of players. For the most part, though, I'm still comfortable with Ødegaard, and we're just gonna have to suck it up and just say that we didn't get the Ipswich at home. I mean, how many times have I not actually capitalized on Ipswich at home? These players, man. Son as well. Crazy. But you know what?
That's crazy. Yeah. I'm in the same boat on all three, by the way. So sorry, before we close this off, I just wanted to mention that I am of the firm opinion that Ødegaard is on penalties. Even if he has no other source of expected value, I still firmly believe that he will take penalties. I've seen discussion around people being uncertain about that. Who really is the competition? Because Trossard took the penalty and missed against Shakhtar in the Champions League. So it's between him and Havertz, and I don't think Havertz is going to take penalties over him. It's only a question of, does Ødegaard give a penalty to Havertz because, let's say, Havertz hasn't scored in like 5 game weeks or something like that. So it's just going to be a pity party or a pity competition, like who wants a penalty the most rather. So I still think Ødegaard takes it. So I'm happy to get the EV, but I don't think we're going to get much else.
Fair enough. I mean, I'll live the dream, I guess, and we'll see. Yes. But yeah, like he's not lighting the world up alight. But I also feel like people, I'm surprised that people are that reactionary to how he's played, if that makes sense. Because this is
I see what you mean.
How he's been the whole time, and we know that the only change is that he's on penalties and potentially corners. So yeah, I think for the most part he's doing fine. Speaking to Elevenify, of course, someone who actually models in the Premier League, even on a player level, he seems still for the most part pretty happy with Ødegaard, and I think we love models for a reason, and there's no reason to get upset about it. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts. Should we just jump onto xMins? I thought it'd be quite interesting to just discuss a couple xMins. I do think that a lot of the players in the game now are back to good xMins. Like I think Eze, for example, is like back to perfectly fine xMins. I think that like even his review defaults, I don't mind so much because the pen share, whatever. Like honestly, I think it's fine. Because it's like he could actually play on the upper bound of minutes, and suddenly you don't even care about that sort of implied pen share for Palace. As far as like, I think the xMins, I think it's the niche picks that I still find quite interesting still. Like, I find Sar to be absolutely insane.
Exactly.
For me, he's the one that has
Yes.
the weirdest sort of default minutes right now, I would say. And that's really it in the midfield position. Maybe if you'd like to give us an update on Amad Diallo and where you think his minutes will be.
Again, it's based off a lot of game weeks now, and
Yeah.
there isn't really anything to say that. I don't think a lot of players have been better than him for Amorim. So from that perspective, it's really easy to say. But based on what we've seen, where Newcastle, for example, completely bodied the midfield, and it was expected. Casemiro Eriksen is just a ridiculous combination. So I'm expecting Mainu and Ugarte again, and Bruno is back, obviously, for the Liverpool game. So for now, I still think he has great minutes. Like I would not have them lower than, let's say, something between 70 to 73 to begin with.
Yep.
But the more game weeks we go, like let's say further ahead, I'm thinking you need to make a decision in terms of, do you think Rashford, Garnacho are ever going to get a chance, or this is how they're going to be for the rest of the season?
Sure.
And that should determine what the DK is. For me right now, I'm thinking you could also hedge a little in that, where let's say one of them will probably gain their place back and one will be sold, which is looking likelier right now. So if that's the case, then you can adjust his minutes accordingly. I don't know. It's weird. He probably was a good pick, but I just feel like Rogers having 90 plus xMins, I don't see how you don't go for him. If you want to invest in a player in that price bracket, I think Rogers is so clear of anyone else. If you have more money, like you said, Sar is quite intriguing around the 6 million price bracket. But yeah, Diallo is a weird one
What
right
about
now.
Semenyo? Do you still think he's better?
I do, and we've been
Yeah, because I
pushing
think Semenyo is
since
actually similar
game week
price to
one.
Rogers now, right? So I still think
Yes, he
Semenyo is
is.
probably the best pick.
Really, over
Yeah.
Rogers? That's surprising. Okay. I thought you would be more favorable towards Rogers just because his minutes are crazy ironclad. Like I don't see how he's going to miss minutes. I just don't.
Yeah, I think like he's only really missed minutes recently because of like exceptional
Yes.
circumstances. Like as I was
Yes.
saying in our group chat, like that's subbing off versus Newcastle was just purely, I think, to
Yes.
protect cards and also just like you've lost that game of football. So
Exactly.
you've just taken your best player off because he needs a day off. And that's the shit.
Yeah.
Like that's all I saw in that game. And progressively game to game, like it's the production as well that's like, quite frightening. Because I think even at the start of the season when he wasn't actually producing anything in terms of GA, I think you could already see that Emery knew how important he was, and now he's actually producing. Like I just don't see how he's gets taken off. But yeah, sure, they can sign Malin, and it can take away like the tapering of some sort of his like X-Men ceiling, but I don't see much happening with that. But Semenyo just ultimately plays really consistent minutes and just has really good underlying stats. I think he's just been a poor finisher this season. I guess that's really all you can chalk it up to. But he also doesn't blank, right, on Gameweek 29, so that's nice for Semenyo. But yeah, I think those three players are the crowns, right? Like Semenyo, Rogers, not Kluivert, and yeah. But
that actually made me laugh. Yeah, that's a good one.
No, I mean,
I was looking at Spurs because that's the first game, and we know for a fact that Ødegaard is out for like 6 weeks, right? So, and Davies is still out, and as are Romero and Van der Ven. So we already know it's going to be Dragoshin, Archie Gray, and two fullbacks, which is quite grim. Of course, I don't see anyone captaining Isaac because we'll get to captaincy, and Fran has been telling me in no uncertain terms that there is no discussion for captaincy this game week, which is quite depressing for me.
Shall we have a look at it?
We can probably.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's actually very close at the top.
It is. And Fran, please go ahead because he was the one who brought this to my attention.
Yeah, I think Salah and Haaland neck and neck. However, can I just say, many weeks ago, Haaland was meant to be well clear. This was meant to be the game.
He was.
that Haaland was meant to be completely clear of, and Salah on 95 is now the king, which just shows you Salah producing, I don't know, something like is he on like 1.3 plus npxGI per game? And Haaland, our boy, is on like 0.77, which is less than Isak and some other players. So yeah, if you want to talk about the fall off, it's here.
Look, I'm enjoying Pep's fall off, but the problem is it's come at the cost of Haaland's fall off
and your FPL team.
And my FPL team, obviously. My FPL team is Pep Guardiola.
Yeah.
So
true.
I'm hoping to take advantage of the AM chip, perhaps with him, but I think Amorim is going to win at the end of the day because I don't think they'll price Pep below whatever is the highest price.
Right.
Just because of winning 4 Premier Leagues in a row. So it's going to come down to between, let's say, Amorim and, like you said, if people want to play it in 24, it's going to be Sean Dyche.
Yeah.
Or like you said, I think for Arne Slot, the floor is amazing. So even if he's at number 1 and he's not going to get table bonus, I just think the goals and clean sheets by themselves will probably get you loads. So yeah, it's going to be. So I'm just going to mention Watkins because poor me, I own only Watkins out of these 3, and I probably have to captain him, and which I will because that's the whole reason I bought him, and knowing that Turan is probably going to start against Everton, given that he will be coming back after 3 games. So. And it's been a good start, right? I'm not going to complain. Like Watkins scored 12 points, he got a penalty. That's essentially the Salah experience, but for a player who's not Salah. So hopefully he does that again, and then I can probably look at selling him. But yeah, that's been a good start for me for that with Watkins.
Sounds good. And to be fair, on the topic of vice captaincy, I'd say Isak is actually a little bit clear of Palmer. So I'm probably
okay. So do you want to discuss that as well? Because I was going to come to vice captaincy this game week. I've seen a lot of chat about potential game week postponements given the state of weather.
Yeah, we can discuss that.
So, on Sunday and Monday, and so everyone's going to play, but just in case, probably better to vice captain Isaac. Just because for a fact that his game will be going ahead. It's the first one after the deadline.
Yeah, it is the deadline game, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't want to fearmonger because I personally don't think there's going to be any games that will be called off. But I remembered that the Spurs Burnley game got called off in one of the COVID seasons. So there is precedence, but there isn't much of it. So I don't know how much snow has to happen at what time before the game, during the game, or whatever for the game to be called off. And I'm not going to pretend like I know anything about it. It's just, Fran's there. He's a reporter on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, so maybe Andy Martin has his weather report.
Can you look out of the window?
Because he's situated probably better in terms of areas of snow. But I think, all the London games seem fine because the worst reports are really rain. So yeah. You want to vice captain anyone sure in London, go for it. I think if you're thinking about generally not making a transfer for certain players like Wood, for example, who might be playing in a snowcast region, I suppose, of England, sure. I guess you can always default to Jesus, that sort of thing. So if that really matters to you, I suppose factor that in. But the weather report is basically like a yellow storm report over the weekend, and including, I think, and leading up to Monday. But it actually seems more likely that I guess there could be a suspended game on Sunday than there is on Monday from reading reports. I could be wrong once again, and obviously weather's weather, but I personally don't care for it, and I'll just be planning my transfers as if all these games are going to happen is my perspective right now, just looking into the reports briefly, and hopefully that settles it.
Yeah, with you right there. It's impossible to factor these things in because it's completely out of your control. So yeah, pretend as if all the games are going to go ahead.
All right, sounds good. Let's just go straight to chat Q&A. Guppy, thanks for joining the show. D. Higginson says, is Critic and Doc still washed in SI? I think Doc's doing very well think Critic has been gambling in this thing called free risk, which doesn't really work out when you're against Mo Salah. As far as that guy, came back from a tough day from work, had dinner, sat on the couch. Thank you so much for joining us for the stream. Really appreciate it. Hope you had a good dinner. Getty FPL, thanks for the first time watching, and thank you for subscribing. If anyone else could be watching right now, please feel free to subscribe too. Luther Blissett mentioning that DB's on for back-to-back MD top 100 finishes. Is that even true? Fair enough.
I think he missed out on like a
1,000
unit there, 100 million or something like that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and Deegan's and responding with, wonder if the Villa correspondent will get Rogers Mins correct this week. I mean, you never know. Daniel Malin apparently is on the way to Aston Villa. The first bid has been rejected, however. So, and yeah, nice to see Flapjack here. I think we responded to Christopher's question in terms of the AM chip. Some discussion of the Andy Martin weather report, which we've referenced to. So, yep. Vice captain. I mean, I think Isak is a great vice captain.
He is. Yep.
And Amram being 0.5. I think that's honestly on the cards, right?
So I have there's two schools of thought from in my head.
Right.
One says, okay, they just look at form, and obviously United are doing so badly that they'll probably make it enticing for people to be engaged.
True.
And the best way or the quickest way to get engagement is for
fans.
Exactly. You knew what I was going to say. So if you want Man United fans to invest in United assets, I think Amorim being cheap is the best way.
True.
But I also think they'll probably not do it because United fan engagement is guaranteed either way. So that's why I'm a little conflicted on that. So I'm thinking it's not going to be obviously the most expensive because it doesn't make any sense. Yeah. But I also don't think it will be the cheapest. So it'll probably end up being one. That's what I'm thinking.
I think it's curious because I do think it is interesting because they probably need to factor in some of the doubles as well and things like that.
They do.
And that will also depend on a lot of like FA Cup outcomes, which they'll have some time to work around. Not much though, really.
Not much.
So they're really going to pay attention mostly to the league table and maybe last year's performance if they care about it. And I mean, you've got projected point tables, things like that. I'm sure that they're working with, right? Because they have simulations of stuff, and that could be interesting. What I would probably say is, like last season, when you think about that Crystal Palace double game week, this chip has the potential to produce that for you, right? Like if you find opportunities where some team has a 2-game week run or like almost even a double that suddenly just looks like out of this world, like that is the true like upside. You're pushing up the table points, you're winning games of football, you're scoring goals, getting clean sheets. That can happen. But it's also possible that this fixture slate this season might not offer you such lucrative opportunities. But I do think, thinking back to the Crystal Palace last season, that must have been such a crazy potential AM sort of usage in one single game week or one double game week, obviously. But we'll need to just monitor these situations as they arise, and maybe you can game the chip when we kind of see a little bit more information, which always goes to this idea of optionality. Yeah, you can consider it, but I think as long as you probably have ideas of how you're planning to use the TC, the free hit, you can always be quite flexible with the AM, right? If you want to be flexible with one chip, I think that is the one. And yeah, we can move on discussion wise. Salah sort of iterated our thoughts on Ødegaard. I think we spoke on that. I kind of understand people moving into Mbumo, but one thing that I found that was quite tricky about Mbumo is, he really does have Southampton away and Man City at home, and those are 2 good games. But after that, they're still kind of middling. There's a great run of games, and I think crucially, the great run of games actually lies around game week 29. So one of my thoughts on Mbumo maybe is, well, not around 29 really, but he plays on 29, which is significant. But what I'd probably say is 26, 27, 28 are like good Mbumo games. So is 24, but going back to the point, Eze's great, Bruno's great, Ødegaard's great, Gordon's great. So I think if you own 2 or 3 out of 5, that's fine. You can live with it. And Mbumo is not far clear of the field. is all I'll say.
So one thing which I found weird, and I'm sure you've already looked into this.
Sure.
Did you not think that his EV for Southampton away was a tad low? And I know his default minutes are low because they're like 84.
Yeah.
But even if you boost his minutes, I just felt like he should have had.
I thought that the City EV was really low. I mean, City I wrote like 10.
Perhaps because it's at home as well.
Yeah.
And
I mean, the City EV is like is not even too different from the Liverpool EV. Like, in fact, it's almost the same. And I wonder if honestly, I think let's give maybe credit to review. Like, I'm sure there's like a historic kind of thing as well there, maybe.
But the historic thing would actually swing it more towards Mbumo, right? Surely, because you're saying just City in general. Yeah, okay, I get it. Because the matchups don't matter anyway. Because every season it's different circumstances. So
yeah,
I don't think there's any reason to go into that. But yeah,
I mean, there must be. I mean, yeah, it's actually impressively high because I think Liverpool are way too good to be passing up 4.2 EV to Mbumo if. You know, like.
Example, I see what you're saying. Okay.
It is weird. I'm not sure what's going on, but
yeah. I honestly, I felt like Southampton away. I was expecting 6+. Honestly, it's such a good game, but again, I don't think. I think there's been enough data where perhaps there's a weightage placed on Brentford home and Brentford away, and Brentford away have actually not cooked at all.
Yeah, they've been
in terms of XG as well.
Generally awful.
So.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But mostly because of, I think, opposition.
Yes, that is also true. So I'm assuming review hasn't leaned too much into it, but we can compare it towards the end of the season what Southampton home versus Southampton away was. So that will probably give us a better idea.
And obviously there's like the managerial issue as well, I suppose. But they still shipped quite a fair bit of EV into XG into West Ham. So. I don't really know quite why that is. It could actually just go back to the point of Mbumo this season has not been super productive, like in underlines, right? And maybe that's sort of taken into account. Because I wonder if there's a gigantic shift between how you'd evaluate Mbumo on market. And actually, like when I had a look into that, honestly, there wasn't too much of a difference. So maybe someone smarter can kind of explain that. But I think it's probably just a reflection of that he's probably just been overperforming and everyone knows it. Questions. When will I move out of Ødegaard? Probably 22+, I would say. Just gonna give him Tottenham at home. Gautam with the question saying whether Solanke's a good FPL option at 352. I think definitely.
Yes.
The way I see it, Ødegaard, Solanke's next 3 games are actually bad because one of the Arsenal games is there, and you know Newcastle now looks like an even better team, for example. So when you're kind of jumping onto these fixtures now, Newcastle home doesn't look so good, but you're still gonna. I think 23 Solanke plus is one of the best forwards in the game easily. So I think he's an easy hold, especially since most people shipping Solanke into Isak need Isak, and it's not because Solanke's bad, but it's because Isak is just that much better.
He's better. Yeah.
And Solanke...
also, and because I'm an unfortunate Son owner.
Yeah.
Son is dying by the minute.
He is, yeah.
As an asset.
That's true.
And the more he is becoming unviable, the more Solanke's stock is rising.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
So you probably have to factor in percentage increase in penalty, because I'm thinking, look, it's not just 1 week; it's every single week. Son is getting now regularly subbed for Timo Werner at around the 60 to 70 minute mark, which is crazy. Like that just probably nullifies him as an asset altogether. I don't know how he rose in price, by the way. That was absurd. I still don't understand what was that.
I think it's because he was getting points, right? And that's what people look at.
No, that was like 2 weeks ago. But you're right, because the game weeks were in such succession that it probably was a delayed effect in his price rise. So yeah, probably that. But it just felt absurd because the Southampton game was so long ago in terms of game week that by the time his price rose, he had already like dropped 2 stinkers. So I don't know what was happening there.
I think it's just stock replacements and people just pulling money there. Yeah, probably the base ownership was quite low as well. But yeah, other questions in chat. That guy says still locked in on Colwell plus Dean. That's rough. But you never know.
Now, I was going to say, Marcus said, bad time for stream. Darts is about to start. So no longer my goat. Just putting it out there.
Fair. APN says, shall I move out of Timber for a hit? I think it's their backlines, Gabriel, Trent, Hall. I think it's fine. I would keep Timber for now. You can always move Timber on a single game week, and I don't think there's any defender that really warrants the hit, because I still think that Hall is like really solid as a pick, and yeah, you can move into a Fulham defender, which can give you sort of I think what could give you at least half the reason for the hit, but it's not good enough. Saleh says, do you think that budget midfielder options are better than the budget cheap forwards right now in the game? I actually don't agree. I think João Pedro is still the best budget player in the game.
Yes.
Like if we're talking anyone sub 6 that is an attacker, I think João Pedro is clearly still the best player in the game. Sub 6.
Would you qualify that as best attacker? Because I still think Castagna is probably
all right for his price point.
Yeah.
No,
just because
I still say
it's ridiculous.
No,
you're right.
I think it goes back to those three midfielders. I think compete well amongst each other, but I think João Pedro is still clear of all of them.
Oh yeah, he is. You're right.
Yeah, but Semenyo and Sarr and Rogers are all fantastic. And I think one
Marvin,
of the... Sorry, go on.
Sorry. I was going to say Marvin's in the chat. I don't think we've ever had him live, so that's good to see.
Yeah, nice to see you around, Marvin. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Sorry, I interrupted you. You were
no, it's fine. I think that's kind of like the beauty of João Pedro, really, as a pick. One of the things we need to talk about too, I think, when you're looking at the budget position, is that the reason why not everyone's going for budget players, even though their sort of XPPM is great, is just because ultimately a lot of people are richer, and without Xhaka, you actually just want absolute value. Like, you just want points from your team, because you suddenly aren't forced into some ridiculous structure where you need all these budget players. So if like thinking back to that sort of Saka structure that I had when I had Salah, Palmer, Saka, I had to have budget players in my team. Now I actually don't really need to, because the next best sort of midfielder outside of Palmer is literally like 8.4 million. So that's a quite a different world to kind of optimizing when Saka was a viable pick. And we know that unfortunately the next best viable option is Isak in the forward position. And after that, actually, like you could argue that you don't really even need to go down to like a Jackson or an Ødegaard or a Bruno. Like, you could go straight to Eze at that point when it comes to efficiency. So it's quite an easy landscape to navigate, I would say.
Also, Jackson, I know we never actually mentioned Jackson, but he's such a dead option, right? Because it's clear that do you not think that just because, okay, I know that the fixture congestion is gone, so he'll probably play most of the games going ahead, and also because Nkunku was just not fitting in, and you know, he Jackson was almost forcefully subbed in as a result of Nkunku not doing anything. So maybe there's he Nkunku will no longer get chances like that. But I was just thinking, the fact that Jackson got rested twice is indicative of the manager being more willing. But like you said, it's perhaps the results that came out of that will make him perhaps think twice before doing it again.
Yeah.
So maybe there's something to that, and he's not that much dead off as an option.
Yeah, I think Jackson's actually like a really good pick now if you own him.
Yeah. Fair.
Let's see. In terms of Salah's question of level of defensive play, clean sheets, surprised about force. I mean, I think the level of defensive play has been surprising, because I think maintaining sort of being the third best defense in the league and actually being quite close to the top 2 is really impressive. The clean sheets, I think, is a little bit of an outcome thing. Like, I still think Liverpool and Arsenal are much better defenses, and I think that's going to remain the case for the rest of the season. And Nottingham Forest actually do have some pretty awful fixtures 3 game weeks time. So we'll look at the end of the season. We'll probably see who's leading on clean sheets. But I would say, like they've been super impressive. I think definitely most models and us would have underrated them as a team from the start. And there's always that thing of, I think, saying yes that they've overperformed a little bit in terms of the amount of clean sheets, but clearly I don't think anyone ever had them pegged as the third best defense in the league, and they probably are, to be fair to them. So quite impressive altogether. As far as any Southampton forwards, I still think it's probably Armstrong. because I still think he's an awful pick. Like in the sense that he is such a bad player that any manager would still struggle to consistently play him if he had better options in front of him. Whereas I think when I look at Dibbling, I was shocked that Dibbling was playing so few minutes in the first 2 games and then suddenly clocked a 90. And I feel like I'm not sure if a light sort of switch hit Ivan Juric, but like,
I mean,
who knows?
That's
I bench Dibbling in Fantasy, man, and I'm outraged because it's like
I'm livid.
Why are you trolling me like this?
Yeah, exactly. Where
Can I
did
say
that
actually,
90
in
come
terms of
from?
xMins, I don't know why Liam Delap doesn't have 100% pen share on review. I don't know what's
He should.
What's
He
the
should.
holdup?
There's no doubt about
Because
that.
he actually could be one of the best forward picks.
Yes, yes.
But
That's true,
but then also how many Ipswich penalties are gonna come, right? It
Yeah.
really you could be looking at 1 penalty for the rest of the season, so maybe I'm talking nonsense, but yeah. All right, moving forwards. Ødegaard to Gordon. I think that's a viable transfer. I mean, if you want to do it now, I'd probably still would do that move on 21 if you really think that there's no faith there. But yeah, you could do it now if you want. The reality is Gordon has a great game 21, so does Ødegaard, and Gordon also has a decent game on 20, and so does Ødegaard. So if you just want to make the move now, you can make it at any point in time. Marvin says Son was taking it long, but he hasn't been convincing. I agree. Like he's actually been so deceptive because when you look at Son's baselines, you're probably thinking this guy has like stepped up his creativity by a lot. Actually, no, he actually looks like completely dead content, and I just think that overall Spurs look like a better offensive team, and he's sort of benefiting from that a little bit to an extent. Maybe he is creative, but I think it's all the other actions outside of sort of goals and assists that he's really looked awful at. And even goals been a bit of a struggle.
And see, here's the thing, right? We would not have cared about that if it were not impacting his minutes.
True. Yeah.
Because he's not contributing enough, he's being hooked at like 60. It's not sustainable for them to have a player like Son play 90 minutes because the team just cannot defend.
Yeah,
but he's just out of it all the time. It's clear that he has lost a lot of pace. So I'm certainly not advocating anyone buy him, and I'm looking to sell him as soon as possible. But I don't think this week is the right week. It's just looking at 21 for now.
I agree. So Marvin says, should I play JP against Arsenal? Got a front 3 of Isak and Wood. I mean, what's the point here? Is it sort of saying? I mean, who's the 8th attacker, I suppose, or the
I see what you mean.
Or the 4th defender that you'd be. I'm playing Job Pedro myself, and I think you've just got to look at it as in. End of the day, if you probably own one Arsenal defender, you're never going to get upset about the outcome. Anyways, because the Arsenal effective ownership is very high. Or worst case, if let's say Job Pedro is competing versus like a 2.x EV sort of pick in your team, and you're suddenly thinking about benching him, like that doesn't make sense. Like losing that 1.3 EV, I think you just play those players and hope for the best outcome. Because you're still giving yourself the best chances.
Would it still be high though? Would it still be high because Timber is out?
Timber suspended, I think, is around a 20% hit in terms of EO. And I think some people are shipping Arsenal defenders, but I don't think they're really shipping them out this week still, though. I think the solver has been setting Arsenal defense for the last 2 weeks, and that's a very engaged, elite-specific portion of the crowd. But I don't think like the average engaged manager is actually shipping out Arsenal defense.
No. I wasn't talking about that. I was only talking about the fact that Timber is out, which means that
in that case, I think that still makes it around 100%, but definitely higher.
Okay, so it's useless.
And it goes back to Gazan's question. I don't think you need to double up on Arsenal defense, and I don't think you need more Arsenal defense. Like, yes, their defense has been performing extremely admirably, and they actually have a pretty favorable run of games, but eventually their fixtures actually do get a little bit worse. I think around that sort of turn in 25 or 27, and like you have such good defenders right now in the game. You have Hall, Munoz, Fulham defenders that you really don't need to double up on Arsenal defense, and that's because I'm assuming that everyone kind of has a spot on their team for Trent. So I think going forwards, unless you own Raya, who is a very easy hold and still might be a transfer to another double gaming goalkeeper, it's actually more likely that people are still going to be shipping out Arsenal defense consecutively week to week. Because when you think about it, Arsenal defense, that second Arsenal defender is so easily going to be, or even that single Arsenal defender could very easily be that triple Liverpool player going forward. So I think you should not worry about that. As far as Marvin's question of, especially with Rodgers, I think just play Job Pedro. That's fine. You're in the same spot as me. Stefan says, would you still sell Saliba for either Anderson, Castagna, or Conte this week? I think, look, Castagna is an interesting question because it's about that immediate upside versus the opportunity for him to lose his spot. Konsa has good value, but I think it's just slightly worse as a pick. And then Anderson is probably a middle of the two. I actually think Anderson's the best pick long term, but I think if you want that sort of short term upside and you really want to gamble that Castagna is going to keep his spot, I'd go Castagna. But I think it'd be between Anderson or Castagna for me.
And review has been really pushing all three of them in almost all the solves. Of course, Munoz is probably clear of all three of them because of his. I mean, he's more expensive as well. But if you want to look at that cheaper price point, then yeah, I think Castagna / Anderson is just crazy value at the moment.
Yeah.
So I think Celia asked this question before, and he's asking about Gameweek 21.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, of course. I mean, for us, it's not even. I mean, for people that own Salah but subscribe to analytics, it's not even a discussion, right? Palmer is so clear of Salah in terms of expected values, and Isaac as well. To be fair, so it's two really good options for that game week.
Yeah, definitely. Mahmoud had a question on like just who to buy really this week. Wood, Mbeumo, Gordon, Trent. I still think Trent is like the priority transfer. I think even on singular game EV, like he actually has the best. So I would just go for Trent. And if you want to take a -4, I mean, it really depends on your team. So I can't answer that question. But I think long term, I would be really happy with Gordon and Trent for at least like the next 6 game weeks, like running. So those players I'd probably say are the most interesting to me. And that's pretty much it for the chat. And thank you so much, Marvin, for joining us as well. Nice to see you around despite the kids. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Again, wishing everyone a happy new year, and hopefully we'll be back to our regular frequency of doing at least one pod per game week. So see you on the other side and have a good game week.
All right.
Bye.